Alrighty, we are live. G'day guys, welcome once again to the TryPod where we break down every single NRL game every week from a betting perspective. This week will be our last preview pod. It's obviously the grand final this Sunday. Should be an absolute cracker, and off the back of going 6-0 on best bets last week, looking to continue that form through to the grand final. It's been a very good finals run for us, sitting at 68% on our best bets, plus cashed a $15 multi last weekend. But it's shaping up to be a really good grand final, Jacob. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I reckon over-under for a number of times you say cracker on this pod, probably 7.5.
Okay.
And we've already got one. I know a lot of people have money on the over. It's been cashing every single week. If you find another adjective, feel free to use it. There are many to describe this game. Very exciting. I'll just say, because you did this recap pod alone, that as good as this grand final is going to be, both these sides could have lost in the prelims, especially looking at the Raiders. When they were down 10-6 and Nickel Clockstad got sent to the bin, and there's match winners on that Bunnies side, and the Bunnies really were knocking on the door. You know, that right there just shows the real difference in the Raiders in 2019, because the Raiders of past years absolutely lost that game. In fact, they lost games that they were far more in control of. And the old Raiders fold 100% and probably lose that game. If you've got like Raiders plus 12.5, you're in danger once they have any adversity. Whereas last week they just showed how resilient they are. The Roosters, let's not just say that they won easy against the Storm. I know that they end up getting up, by 8 points. But certainly when the Storm pulls that game back to 8-6, the Storm were also knocking on the door. And as good as you are defensively, and we're going to talk about how brilliant the Roosters are in this sport, look at some of the tries that were scored last week. You had the Cordner try off the bomb where Tupou, only because he's 7 foot tall, was able to pop it back. The Whiten try basically drops the ball but gets a toe to it and scores. Or where Corey Allen spills the ball and the Raiders score. I mean, you get fluky tries just because the defense is at such a high level in this stage of the competition that a deflected kick or just a lucky bounce can be the difference between whether a try is scored or not. And I get the feeling we've got a game coming up like that where it will just take one moment, whether it be luck, skill, brilliance, that could break this open, because it is a really exciting matchup.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you're right, there were certain moments in both games pretty much. Like you said, like even Dewey, knocking that on when he grounded it was controversial, that's for sure. So both games I felt like could have gone either way, especially that Roosters one. It looks like a fairly easy win. They only, concede one try. But you're right, at 60 minutes it was 8-6 and it looked like it could go either way. And shaping up to be a really good game, this one, the Raiders-Roosters. And I think, to be honest, we've got two deserving teams in the final, not necessarily the two best teams in the comp, just the way that the final shaped out and the Raiders beating the Storm. But look, Ricky Stewart has done, like you said, he has done an incredible job there, because, you talk about the Raiders of past years and it's just, like you said, that team that would give up a 10-point, 12-point lead late, and their defense has been just one of the best in the comp this year. And once again, it says defense does win championships, because both of these teams have been top 4 defensive sides throughout the season, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Like, the Storm had a historical season, finished top, but you get yourself into that top 4. That's the game, that week one of the finals game is the game you absolutely have to win. We've said that, we've harped on that all year. And the two teams that have made it are the two teams that won in week one of the finals in the top 4 matchups, because they got that 14-day preparation. You can't overstate how important that is. That ultimately, those games, as we said, they were decided late. Maybe just having that tiny bit of extra energy, and also being at home, and both these sides benefited from a bit of, of home ground advantage last week.
Yes.
That got them over the line. A couple of things to talk about, before we dive deep into the matchup, but we will dive deep, and we're not going to state, obvious things. We're trying to be different and talk about things that the public is overestimating or underestimating, little wrinkles in there that might not be accounted for. For years we've said things like how much we love a guy like James Tedesco. That is stating the obvious, but we were saying, we believe Tedesco is even better than people realise. We've said that for a long time, and from the minute that the Roosters got a guy like James Tedesco last year, you would have seen on our power ratings, we've had the Roosters as the best team in the comp. And you go back to round 1, 2018, where the Roosters lost to the Tigers, and I think they lost a couple other games in their first 6. We still had the Roosters top. We know how good this side is. Obviously, they are trying to be repeat champions. It hasn't happened since 93, 94. It's funny, everyone is talking about back-to-back this week. I don't feel like people were talking about it as much last year when the Storm had the same chance to do it. it's honestly not even common that you get a team win the comp and make the grand final the next year. But the Storm, you got to remember, won it in 2017, made the grand final last year. It was the Roosters who denied them. And the Roosters have done it. It is a great achievement just to have this opportunity. What about the Raiders? They're vying to be the biggest underdog winner of a grand final in over 25 years. If you look back in recent history, the Panthers won as big underdogs in 03, the Knights in 01, the Storm upset the Dragons in 99. None of those teams were paying over $3, which the Raiders are in this one.
And really, rarely do you get an underdog of over 6 points in a grand final. It rarely ever happens. So I believe you when you say that. I did not know that stat, but it's true. You look at last year, the game was basically pick 'em. Even like Shark Storm was essentially basically pick 'em as well. So usually you do get the two best teams in the comp in the final, and that's what should have happened this year with the Storm and the Roosters. And look, to be honest, if you got the Storm and the Roosters in the grand final, well, you saw roughly what the line would have been. It would have been around that 3 to 4 points. So, it makes sense that, this is going to be a grand final of, a bigger underdog than we're used to, because not many people expected the Raiders to make the final, even when the final started. And especially at the start of the season. I know, we were a little bit high on the Raiders at the start of the season in terms of the public. I mean, most people didn't even think they would make the 8. But even when the final started, I guess most people can say they did not expect the Raiders to be here. But that's what we have at the moment. Before we get into the grand final, Jacob, did you have anything in regards to possibly the earlier games that you did want to talk about just briefly? I know that you went and watched the grand final there up in Redcliffe over the weekend. Anything you wanted to chat about there before we get cracking?
Oh, look, I haven't deep dived into that. But I've really enjoyed watching a bit of the NRL women's comp, and we've got the women's grand final. And my early lean, I actually do think the Broncos, who are the favourites, I know that they lost last week, but they didn't need to win that one. I think they probably are better than the Dragons, who've lost a couple of their key players through the last 3 weeks. In the state championship, I was at the Queensland Cup final, where Burleigh, who are a feeder to the Titans, they won quite comfortably in that one, whereas the Newtown Jets obviously won in Golden Point, and the Newtown Jets is a side that's got a lot more players with first grade experience. They feed the Sharks, and my early lean as well is that they look too good. But I'll probably deep dive into those games later in the week and share more thoughts on our app. There'll be a lot more to come on our app. I know we're going to put up a few best bets or a couple that we have for the grand final, but still to come. We're going to have, obviously, our multi, some additional value plays. We'll probably give you a grand final day multi where we find good value in all 3 of the games, because I know people want it. Clive Churchill medal, first try scorer, same game multi. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll probably share a lot more of that. Even you might have to wait till Saturday. That will all be on the TryPod app. Now, to dive into this game, I thought we start with the previous matchups. And we were at this game. It was Magic Round in Brisbane, of course. I think it was round 8, where we watched the Raiders play the Roosters. So to talk about that game, my takeaway, which the line was about 7.5, and we were actually on the Raiders in that one. It didn't look good early. It was 18-0 out of the blocks to the Roosters in that one. The Raiders might have got one try back, and then it was 24-6. And it was just long-range tries, and the Roosters were just dicing up the Raiders in that one. Very uncharacteristic performance for the Raiders compared to how consistent they've been defensively all year. They'll need to kind of right those wrongs, obviously, in this one, but we've seen them be even more stout as the season has progressed. And when we get to when they did have a rematch, it wasn't the same story. But that was a crazy one, because then the Raiders did fight all the way back. They got it back to 30-24 down, and only a forward pass call denied them, making it 30-all, and we could have had Golden Point. So yes, it's crazy that was a cool game, and it's funny how that has ended up being obviously the grand final. Do you have any kind of memories or takeaways from that one in Brisbane?
Not really. I was going to go into the second one, though, when they rematched in round 21. And obviously, we watched that one. And I think, if I remember correctly, we were on the Raiders in that one. Maybe we loved
the Raiders. That was my favourite play that week, I remember
you're right.
As well.
So they lose 22-18. But, I mean, they had every chance to win that game. And I'll go through it once we get into the breakdown of what they've kind of done since that game. Because I thought they were just as good, if not better, than the Roosters on the day. And to put in good performance after good performance, because it's often with these teams, the Raiders of old would have put in a great performance like that, especially in the regular season. You play the Roosters, you get up mentally for that one. But I think it showed such mental toughness and such good preparation that Ricky Stewart has put into this team to go in and have an absolute physical battle against the Roosters, fall just short, and then, what you kind of expect to happen with these, non-elite teams, you get down 18-0 the next week against Melbourne, and, the Raiders of old would have folded in that situation, but you come all the way back. And I think that is the mark of a really good team, is to be able to put in, back-to-back and multiple really good performances in a row. And that's what this Raiders team has been able to do, especially down the stretch.
Yeah, I recall that game as well, 22-18, and it was a knife-edge game. The Raiders were knocking on the door very late. One of the tries, from my memory, was absolute bullshit, I remember. Yeah. And the contested bombs are going to be huge in this grand final too. I mean, they've got a weapon, the Roosters, in a guy like Tupu that's taller than everyone else and a great leaper. But it's just everything that goes with it. You put up a bomb, near the try line, and there's obviously always a chance that a guy like Tupou can snatch it. But there's also, there's that degree of how much do you escort. You obviously want to try and give your opposing winger, in this case Rapana, a clear run to get back up for it. Then the penalties come into play. It's going to be a fine line all night. The other thing the Roosters do really well is where sometimes they don't even contest the ball, but they jump into the fullbap or the winger. Yeah. To pretend they're contesting the ball, but really just to force an error.
It's smart.
And that happened in that game where there was a clear Rapana taken out in midair and drops it, and the fucking bunker has the nerve to say clear the contest when every man and blind Freddie can see that it was a penalty.
And
the Roosters went on and scored a try there and won the game by 4 points. But my big takeaway was just it was a bloody close game. Talking about how the Raiders had to go from that brutal stretch of Roosters at home, in a huge electric stadium, then the Storm come back. They went to New Zealand. Now, New Zealand's not always a tough game, but still flying over on a short turnaround. They demolished them. They had another really tough game at home to Manly. We were talking about, when will Ricky rest his players? Is this fatigue going to catch up to him? Because we were watching other sides, especially the Roosters, played the season very differently. They just said, Friday night, big matchup against the Knights, doesn't matter. Cooper Cronk, have a rest. Boyd Cordner, give it another 2 weeks. Teddy, Latrell, you've played Origin, it's okay, sit out. And they even forfeited wins. They lost games, as we know. But I will say, I'm not too concerned.
You have that luxury when your team is stacked.
Yes, but and we were saying Ricky still probably should have rested players here or there. The New Zealand game would have been a game where, I'm talking about the first time they played New Zealand in about round 22 when they went over there, where they could have rested a couple of guys and still probably won. They won the game by 40. But I think the fact that they got the Warriors in round 25, they couldn't really improve their position. In the end, they were happy to go down to Melbourne. They won. They rested 6 starters in that game. Then obviously, just again, that crucial win in week 1 of the finals against the Storm, which again shows us what they're made of. That was a come-from-behind win. That gave them the 14-day turnaround. Then to play at home so you don't travel. And the fact, this is a tiny, minute 1% edge, but they won the prelim on a Friday night. So they get the 9 days lead into this one. Just 1 extra day for recovery. I'm not worried that this team is going to run out of petrol, say a side that have had to go the long way around the mountain, play everywhere, to the...
Yeah, am I frozen? I look like I'm frozen.
Can you look pretty funny, but I can hear you. So.
At least you can hear me. That looks strange. I guess it's probably the best face that I'm going to make. But no, I think you can't probably underestimate that fact. The extra day's rest is probably come... this is the best time to have an extra day's rest leading into the grand final. And not only that, I guess, these teams know each other fairly well. They played each other a couple of times during the regular season, but I think it helps to be able to have won the prelim on the Friday night. Then you can absolutely study the game film on the Saturday. You know who won straight away. I think that's certainly a benefit leading into a grand final, because strategy and coaching is going to be very important in this one in terms of game plan and stuff like that, and just an extra day. But you're right, it is the perfect prep for the Raiders. I know they had, like you said, a really tough stretch down the back end with playing Storm, and then obviously a fully healthy Manly with Tommy Turbo still there. They had to go down to Shark Park where they won in a close one, but they got that. They rested everyone, like you said, for that Warriors game, which was pretty much perfect. Then you roll into the Storm game, then you have a week off. So I think it's pretty good prep for the Raiders. But in terms of the Roosters, obviously they've had fairly good prep as well. They got the bye, which, as we know now, is a really big advantage in the NRL, and it's hard to kind of put a point spread value on that bye. But after 26 weeks or more of footy, a week off to rest any niggling injuries, which, basically every player has during the finals, you can't really put a value on it, but we said
that's right, and it's such a physical competition. We've talked about that. It's only getting more physical. Speaking of injuries, let's talk about the big ones on the Roosters side of things. Luke Keary legitimately looked hampered. He's got that ankle injury. He legitimately was limping around a little bit against the Storm. So, is he 100%? I don't think he probably is coming into this one. That's a factor that you gotta calculate. He was the best player on the field last year that helped them win the comp, obviously. Orbison had quite a nasty concussion. He looked like completely out of it. It sounds like he will get through the protocol. That's one just to monitor. And then Jake Friend, this is a big one as well. Obviously, he's been through the ringer. He's only actually played 5 games this year. He's a co-captain. Yep. We know what he brings to the table. Broken arm was what kept him out of the team. And then I think he got an infection from what I heard, but then a calf injury flared up, and it's just been unknown at what stage he would come back. They were saying he could probably play in that week 1 finals game, and I was thinking, well, that makes sense. It's not an elimination game. You bring him in, and try and integrate him back into the team if he's good to go. But then they didn't play him, and I thought, well, that also makes sense because now you've got 2 weeks off. He'll definitely be sweet for the prelim. Yeah. Now I was surprised he didn't play in the prelim. They stuck with Verrills. So now, do you bring a guy back for the grand final? I know he'll be fit, but he's not match fit, and Verrills has done a good job.
Well, that's what I was kind of saying last week. Verrills has done a good job, and I know you mentioned that, if Jake Friend is good to go, then they should play him. And yeah, you're right. I probably agree. Especially in a finals style game, Jake Friend's, style of play suits the finals better. It's a low scoring grind. You have to make a lot of tackles, which he is excellent at. He's going to make 50 plus tackles. But you're right. He's been out for a long time now. Verrills has done a job in there. So, look, to be honest, if you ask me from a betting perspective, if Jake Friend actually is announced in for this game, I don't know if it's going to move the needle or should make the Roosters any bigger favourites than they already are in this one. Do you think that would move the needle for you? Because I don't necessarily think it does. Verrills has been there, for a while now. He's got the chemistry going. I understand that, if they're both at full strength and, both got the chemistry and everything, then Jake Friend is the better hooker. But just to bring him in for a grand final after he hasn't played, an NRL game in a while now, I think that's risky. And
to be
honest, if he didn't play last week, then is he going to be 100% this week? He's not.
Yeah, it's a very funny one. I mean, honestly, the way that Robinson plays this, it's possible that they've already decided a month ago he's probably not right with everything, and they just actually rather string people along and make people game plan for multiple key position players. And maybe they've known that he's just not quite right. He's had a terrible run of injuries. He's not going to be at the level he needs to be, and maybe they already know in their camp that he's not playing. But it's the same as last year where they kept it secret. We probably don't know the answer till an hour before kickoff.
True.
And for me, if Friend is in, I probably think it's a tiny extra edge to the Roosters because I think they'd only choose to bring him in if they thought it improved the side. But if he's out, I don't know if that's necessarily going to change the line. On the Raiders side, there are some key injury concerns too. And again, these are just the ones we know about because everyone's a little bit banged up by this stage. But Josh Hodgson, which is massive. We just talked about Friend and potentially Verrills. If Verrills is starting there, that's one of the only parts of the field where I can see a key edge to the Raiders is at number 9. Hodgson is an amazing player, and they're going to need his skill and craftiness and him to help out the halves with a little bit of end of sets gameplay as well and kicking too. He's got the flu. I think that should be all right. The game's not till Sunday. It's a little bit of disruption. Leilua, that's a bit of a scary one. It's not just a calf strain. They said a burst blood vessel in his calf, and he looked gone for all money against the Bunnies. That's a risk to bring him in. I mean, a player like him, I feel like he's definitely going to want to play in this one, but they need to make the right call. I guess ultimately, if Leilua plays, the Raiders are a side that do keep an outside back in Simonson on the bench. Yep. So worst case, Leilua, the calf goes, and they're just going to be down to 16, 3 on the bench. Simonson comes in to the wing and Kotrick would play centre. And teams do that sometimes. They carry an extra utility that doesn't play a lot of minutes, so it wouldn't cripple them. But one thing I do know for sure, Leilua can't be out there any less than 100% or he will be found out by the Roosters. And finally, Whiten as well with the bad shoulder. I think he's playing through pain. We've seen what Cooper Cronk did last year. They wasn't too effective, but that's another concern for the Raiders as well.
Yeah, definitely. And just on the Hodgson thing, I guess, they said it's a flu. They kept him away from practice on the Tuesday. I'm not exactly sure whether he practiced today or not. But look, I'm happy for him to rest up. Look, he's been there all season long. He's got the chemistry going. If he takes a few days off or a couple days off, I think that's fine. I think that's less important. It's more important for him to be fully fit. So I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue. They said they were just keeping him away from the team just in case anyone else caught something. So I think that's going to be fine as long as he rests up. I'm more than happy for him to take until bloody Friday off if he can be fully healthy, because he's already got all that chemistry and everything going with the team from being there for so long. I think that would be a bigger issue if, let's say, Jake Friend had the flu and couldn't practice with the team, because that in that scenario, chemistry is way more important. Look, Jake, I'll mention this one thing to you. I have actually not got any text on the screen yet. Should I be putting that up there, or should we?
No, I think we'll keep it. We'll keep breaking down the game, and we do have some best bets, and then we can put them at the end.
We've got best bets coming, and we also have, I don't know if you mentioned, Jacob, we've got an epic same-game multi that we've made that we'll share with you right at the end of the pod as well.
We certainly do. Now, look, in terms of the way this game's going to play out, I could talk a bit about that, and then we could go through the units briefly as well. But, I mean, how do the Roosters win this game? We talked about injuries. Let's also talk about suspension, because Waerea-Hargreaves back from suspension, and he's so important for their forward pack. I think the fact that he was out was what we felt gave the Storm that extra bit of a chance to upset them last week. But how do the Roosters win this game? I feel Waerea-Hargreaves, Cordner, who has had rest this year, and then it shows why, because he was man of the match last week. He was phenomenal last week, real captain's knock. TKO, Liu. These are sledgehammers in the middle of the field. They're just going to wear the Raiders down. They're going to punch the ball forward. They're going to get good meterage, good yardage every set. And then you got the great kicking games. You got Kiri and Cronk, and you got the class on the edges. You got Latrell, Manu, even Angus Crichton. Your finishers in Tupou Morris, and of course Teddy. That's how they win this game for me.
Oh, for sure. And we always go on about, how good the Roosters outside backs are. But let's not forget, this Raiders side is stacked in the outside backs as well. I mean, I know Kotrick got that knock to the head, but he was fine last week. He looked great. And he's, an origin level player. Croker has had maybe the best season that he's had all year. Like you said, BJ hopefully is healthy, but he is a monster. And then Rapana is, a rep level player as well. So I don't think they lose an awful lot. I don't think you can necessarily say the outside backs are a ton better for the Roosters. But then you get to fullback. And as we know, Tedesco is the best fullback in the comp. He can break a game, as you saw when he scored that vital try for the Roosters when they were up 8-6, just to put the game to bed. And he can do that kind of stuff, And like you said, in a game like this where we expect it to be a low scoring game, not many points, sort of grand finals remind me a little bit of State of Origin in the way that, you can see by the betting, the total is 33.5. You rarely see totals of 33.5 when there's no rain in the regular season. Defense tightens up, in-game kicking becomes more important. There's less points scored. And that means that, game breakers like Tedesco, just one play, one bit of brilliance can break the game open. So they definitely have an edge in the fullback spot. But to be honest, Chance Nickel-Klokstad has been great all season. He's solid back there. He actually reminds me a little bit of Slater in that he's just fucking solid. He's quick. He doesn't make many mistakes. I don't even remember the last time he's dropped a ball. He's been very, very solid for them. The emergence of him has been absolutely massive for the Raiders, just to have a solid fullback there so they didn't have to keep fucking mixing around with the halves and stuff like that. So in terms of the outside backs, obviously I give an edge to the Roosters, but how big is that edge? I don't think it's that big.
No, I feel the same way, actually. I feel like 2, 3, 4, 5 are very similar, and then the difference in the outside back units is that Teddy is the better player than CNK. I mean, you talk about how it's origin style. It's funny, when I saw the preliminary origin squads being picked before game one, a lot of people thought that Tupou was going to get picked for New South Wales, and as a Queenslander, I was thinking, I'd love it if they pick a boring player like him. I'm scared of game winners. I don't want them to 100%. Pick guys like Tommy Turbo was injured, but even a guy like Nick Kotrick, I don't want them to pick those guys. Actually, Tupou's been quietly putting together another brilliant season, and his ability in the air can't be understated either, and I kind of talked about that earlier. You mentioned Teddy can get a try out of nowhere. He scores essentially the winning try against the Storm last week, but
Yes.
he didn't create that try. Most players actually would have scored that one. That was created
Cronk
by
did.
the 50-meter break
Yes.
with Cronk. So let's talk about the halves here, because you have Cronk, who's gone for 3 comp wins in a row. And really, for his legacy, that's going to raise some questions. He's an amazing player. And then Keary, who I said, again, is such a class player. Yes, has the injury concern. And on the other side, of course, I guess the guy we haven't mentioned, Aiden Caesar, is going to have a huge game.
Yeah, look, he's going to have a good game, I think. He's going to have to be solid, but I think the game breaker there is Whiten. I mean, he's had maybe one of the best seasons that we've seen, in him for a long time. Maybe the best season I've seen from him ever. So I think, not necessarily that Caesar's just a passenger there, but I think he just has to be solid, and Whiten, can come up with the brilliance. He can attack the line. We've seen him do it, time and time again. So, obviously Cronk and, if Keary's healthy enough, obviously the edge is there for the Roosters in the halves. But look, ball playing and that kind of stuff is very important in these kind of grand final games. They can make or break it. But look, I trust Whiten. I've seen what he's done all season long. And look, Caesar's been fine. He's had one of his better seasons as well. So look, in-game kicking, obviously, like I said before, it is certainly more important in grand finals and stuff like that, because you're not just, you're not packing on 60 metres a set like you do against some teams in the regular season. You're kind of lucky to make 40 metres in a set in games like this, in the grand final, in state of origins and stuff. So in-game kicking does become a lot more important, and for that aspect, I do give the edge to Keary and Cronk. I mean, you saw what Keary did last year when Cronk was hampered or out. He went to another level. But he, to be honest, he hasn't been that good without Cronk there. Obviously, it's different. Keary goes up a level when Cronk's not there. He gets the ball more. He has more opportunities and stuff like that. But I think this one's down to Cronk, because Keary's not going to be 100%. Cronk is going to have to do most of the attacking, most of the kicking, and creating most of the opportunities for the Roosters there. So, look, if he's not on his game with a not fully healthy Keary, the Raiders have every chance in this one, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Kicking's important, and obviously the edge in the halves goes to the Roosters. But one thing I'll say as well is Josh Hodgson adds a little bit of extra in the kicking. He can help his halves out because he can kick at timely moments. And the other, underrated factor with kicking is you can't give them time. And so kick pressure is going to be so important, but also play the ball speed. And I think in a grand final where they might swallow their whistle a little bit because they're going to be kind of urged that this is the showcase game and try and let it flow, the Raiders may actually take advantage of that and try and lay over the ruck, really push the limits of the 10 metres as well. But it comes down to who wins the forward battle, because if you can get quick play the balls and bend the line, it's going to give more time to your kickers. And certainly the Raiders need that. If they're under pressure kicking, that's a problem. So which way do you see the edge in the forwards in this one? There's a lot of quality forwards on the field.
Oh, definitely a lot of quality forwards. And look, you have to give the edge to the Roosters, don't you? I mean, they've got, I don't think, arguably the best forward pack in the comp. And I think the edge more so just in the experience factor. I mean, you've got Boy Cordner, who's been there, done that. And like you said, he had a great game last week. You get Jared Warrior-Hargraves back. I think that, Victor Radley, Orbison, those kind of guys have been
Victor
great.
Victor
the Inflictor, they've been great for them this year. But look, the Raiders forward pack has done a job this year. I know that they're not, big name, not as big a names. You wouldn't consider them as good a forwards as this Roosters side, but Soliola just gets in there, puts his head down, fucking runs it hard. And look, you've got guys like Bateman, who is, not only a great forward, runs the ball hard, but he's a ball player. He does the hard yards. Like Elliot Whitehead.
Can we just talk about Bateman though? Because I want to specifically talk about John Bateman.
Yeah, sure, go for it. I was just going to add that, Papali, that is, you think of guys that can break a game open. Like we mentioned, we talked a lot about Tedesco. But the last 2 games, Papali's been the one that scored a solo try out of nothing to win them the game.
And it goes beyond just scoring a try. That's what people see in the highlights. But Papali's been unreal, probably the best prop in the comp. And how much talk have you heard this week about how important Papali is to them? I said this about a month ago that he was putting together an incredible season and he's done so well for them in their 2 finals games. But Bateman, I had this quote that I thought was so funny a few weeks ago, and I haven't said it on the pod, but the season that Bateman's had, you said like he's a playmaker because he gets the ball and he kind of has this stutter step where he can freeze the guy in front of him, he can draw and pass, he can break a tackle, he can offload. You never know what he's going to do, but good things happen when he touches the ball. They had the Trbojevic brothers on the Matty Johns show. I think they'd just come up against the Raiders or they were playing them next. And Matty Johns said to Jake Trbojevic, what's the deal with Bateman? Like, there's not that much of him, but it just seems like every time you can't tackle him, he's breaking tackles or, he's getting offloads. Right. And Jake Trbojevic described him as Mong strong, which I just find is the funniest phrase because he is like that. Like, it'd be like a skinny crack addict that's outside the front of McDonald's at 3 a.m. Like, you'd think that you're physically way bigger and you'd turf, but you just know he'd have that, like, unnatural, like, weird strength. And that is Bateman. Not to mention he's just a born winner. He's won a lot of levels back in England. I love that Mong strong. So credit to Jake Trbojevic for that one. I don't actually give an edge to the Roosters starting forward pack. I think that, as we said, how good Papali is and Elliot Whitehead's been solid, tapping a rep forward. They can match it. But I do give an edge to the Roosters bench. I think the fact that you bring on Angus Crichton, TKO, off that bench is better and a lot more experienced than who the Raiders are going to lean on. They're going to need big minutes from their starting forwards. So,
it's so crazy. Like, you get JWH back and you're just like, okay, sorry, Takiaho, you're on the bench. Like, it's fucking ridiculous,
Absolutely. And I spoke earlier before about the game plan of how the Roosters win this game, but I should say, like, I don't think that's guaranteed. I really do give the Raiders a chance. And I tell you the game plan for the Raiders, the way I see it, for them to win this grand final, they need to do two things that are kind of counterintuitive, but when you're an underdog, you need to take some chances. I feel they need to have a really high completion rate, which is kind of obvious, but they also need to be willing to offload the ball because you have to generate additional plays and you have to generate openings. And this Roosters side is one of the best defensive sides I've ever seen, something I really noticed when they played the Raiders both times this year, but also in a lot of their games this year, how good they are defensively with their communication and their sliding. A lot of players, when they're faced with an overlap, and the Raiders are quite good at getting an overlap because they've got good playmakers and they offload the ball. And what happens is when a team's faced with an overlap, the defender kind of panics and just tries to shut it down quickly. Yes. What the Roosters will do is invite that player who has the ball to run, because that player who has the ball, if they're running it, they trust their teammates will get across and cover and be able to slide. Whereas if you try and jam in, that's when you get, beaten with a draw and pass. And now the problem is further wide and the wingers streaking down the sideline. And the Roosters actually sacrifice yardage at times when a team spreads it because they never give up that line break. And that's been, shown in the finals. They've only conceded one try in each match. When they've really tightened the screws, they are so hard to score against. I already said at the start of this pod, no team is perfect and you can get a lucky try, and the Raiders might need one. They're more than a converted try underdog. They might need a lucky try for deflection or whatever the case may be. But the way that the Raiders can actually open up the Roosters, if they can at all, if they get that opportunity, they're going to have to take it. That's the key for me in this one. I think one of the ways they can do that is chancing their arm a little bit with the offload game.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's similar to like the Melbourne Storm in the fact that, those last few years where they've just been so utterly dominant. One of the reasons was because their slide defense was just so epic. Like, you could never, ever, rarely beat them on the edges. And I think, like you said, it's very similar to this Roosters team at the moment. And I know you have great wingers in Kotrick and Rapana, but, because we see this as kind of, an Origin-style game, you don't get as many chances where the game kind of opens up and you get a chance to streak down the sideline. So, but they can be beaten through the middle. And I mean, we've seen, like I said, Papali bust runs down the middle for tries. So, they've got that in their arsenal as well, which they're going to have to use. You mentioned something about getting extra possessions and obviously completion rate in a grand final is massive because the more times you can have the ball in good field position, the better. And what we haven't mentioned so far is this Raiders team is the fucking expert at stealing the ball. They have mastered that, especially Hodgson. So, look, if you ask me over under, 1.5 times that the Raiders take the ball away in a one-on-one strip, Jacob, what would you say? I'd probably take the over. And, it's, you couldn't have said this in the last 20 years in an NRL game that a team's going to get 2 one-on-one rakes. So, they seem to have perfected that. And like you said, if refs are trying to put their whistle away. I think if it's borderline that the second player is touching them, maybe they just let that one slide. So advantage there to the Raiders. They have in one off season perfected that move.
That's going to be so interesting as well because the Roosters know it's coming, and the Roosters are probably 100%. The smartest and most well coached and most well prepared side in the comp. So they've spoken about it, and they're going to have to try and mitigate that. But you talk about
every team knew it was coming in the finals. They've been doing it all season.
Hodgson's one-on-one strips. I mean, the one that he strips where he gets possession for his team against the Storm, I'm going back to the regular season game, where that got them the ball that they then scored the winning try late in that game was amazing. But what about his strip on Cody Walker to save that try in the first half?
That was a joke.
And you go on to win the game by 4 points or 6 points, 4 points in the end. That was amazing. But I don't say the Raiders can win this game because they can just strip it. It's not that easy, and you do take a risk. You actually might reset the tackle count. I know the Roosters will have something up their sleeve for that, but it's definitely a factor worth mentioning. Are we ready to unveil the best bets? We've kind of spoken about.
Let's do it.
How we see this game playing out. I will say one more thing that might just give a tiny bit of value to the Raiders in this one. Apart from the fact that the Roosters, just look so unbeatable, and when they turn it on, everyone knows how good they are. I think the fact that both these teams won very close games last week, but the Raiders didn't cover. Of course, the Bunnies scored a try with 30 seconds left and cut the score to 14-10, and the line was 6.5. If you bet on the Raiders last week with the line, you lost. Conversely, with the Roosters, that line was, 4.5. It's 8-6 late in the game. And it was in the balance, and they score a late try and they win by 8. And not only that, you have the Roosters winning by 8 against the Storm, while the Raiders won by 4 against the Bunnies. And everyone's going to tell you the Storm is better than the Bunnies, so it looks even more impressive. I think if it had been the other way around, if it's Raiders that win that game by more than a converted try, and the Roosters who only get home by 2 or whatever, this line could be maybe closer to 6.5, maybe even a little bit juiced to the Raiders. There's probably a half point to a point just in the manner in which these teams won. Because if you've been back in the Roosters recent weeks, you've been winning. Whereas with the Raiders, they've won their games more narrowly.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, it all harps back to, exactly what you said. But it is the fact that punters, especially amateurs, bet what they saw last. And what they saw last was the Raiders not covering. And what they saw last was the Roosters covering. And what the game that they saw last was the Roosters beating the Storm on the Saturday. So that's the most recent thing in their mind. You're right. Like, if it was to flip the other way around, or even if Raiders won by 20 or whatever and Roosters squeaked one out, then you're right. I think we would be seeing this, lying a bit closer to 6. So with all that being said, as you've probably noticed with us talking, we are on the Raiders in this one, and I am going to throw up a graphic now with our best bets. There are only 3 there, but there is a couple of mechanical ones there on the board, so that's why the writing is a little bit tiny. But if you want to, take a screenshot of that so you can look at it later on. Do you want me to go through these now, Jacob?
Go through it, mate.
All right, we've got 3 best bets on the game. Like we mentioned, the Roosters are 7.5 point favourites hosting the Raiders. Well, they are technically hosting. One thing we didn't talk about before I get into these best bets is, look, people are going to say, look, Roosters home field worth 2.5 points, but look, I wouldn't give them 2.5 points for home field advantage. There it is at ANZ. They haven't been playing their home games there all season long. And yes, the Roosters do get a little bit of a bump in advantage for not having to travel to this one, but I don't think you can give them a full home field advantage in this one. So we've got 3.
I'll add to that actually as well, because I was at the grand final, been to a few, but I remember 2016 when the Sharks were there with their chance to break their 50-year duck. And I know the Raiders duck is, 27 years, not quite as long, but that's still a lifetime for a lot of fans.
100%.
And the Sharks, who would only get 5 or 10,000 to a home game, suddenly there were 70,000 Sharks fans at ANZ. And I think that the crowd will actually be more in favour of the Raiders. I think everyone who's not a Roosters fan is on the Raiders, and I actually don't give any home advantage to the Roosters in this grand final. And that is an important factor worth mentioning.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, can you imagine if you're a Raiders fan, you haven't seen this in, over a couple of decades, you'll probably pay a lot of money to get seats to this one, that's for sure. So,
yeah, they've already said whoever's the last one out of Canberra, turn the light off, because they're going to be invading Sydney, and it's going to be a sea green, and I can't wait to see it.
Yes, indeed. All right, let's go through these plays. First of all, we're going to make a mechanical Raiders plus 8 points it's going to end up being $1.84. The way we're going to do it is 58% of our stake on the Raiders plus 9.5 points. You'll find that one in the alternate line section on either Ladbrokes or Neds at $1.72. Then we're going to put the rest of our 42% stake on the Raiders plus 7.5 points. That one is $2 on Neds. Neds and Ladbrokes, I think, this weekend, Jacob, are doing $2 lines. So certainly worth, even if you just wanted to play that line, that's a great line for plus 7.5. The next one is one that we haven't actually done all season long. This is a new bet for us. But we're going to take a bet of the Roosters to win by 1 to 10 points or the Raiders to win by 1 to 12 points. It's going to end up being $1.84. The percentages that you're going to want are 59% on the Roosters to win by 1 to 10 points. The best price on that one is $3.10 on Sportsbet. And 41% of your stake on the Raiders to win by 1 to 12 points. That is $4.50 on Bet365. And the last bet is the Raiders to win a half. That is $1.83 on BetEasy. I have gone through the Raiders 1 to 12 bet previously, but our value play for the night, and we will be releasing some more of these probably on Saturday morning. The great value play is the Raiders to win by 1 to 12 points. That is $4.50 on Bet365. And I believe on Bet365, you do get the extra time, extra chance with the margin bet. So if this one goes to extra time, I think you still have a chance of winning it, which some of the sites do not. But $4.50 is the best price in the marketplace that we could find anyway. So get on that one.
And just to explain, the bookies don't get the odds that wrong. We're not saying the Raiders will win. We're not saying the Raiders should be favourites. We completely understand why the Roosters are favourites. But we are saying we think the value lies in the green machine, in the milkman. And that's why at $4.50 to win 1 to 12, we think that is a great value price rather than, playing the Roosters. But if I was playing the Roosters, I'd probably go Roosters 1 to 12 too. You spoke about the fact that one of our best bets is that margin bet. Just to explain it, you might know if you've been betting with us last week, we won all 6 of our best bets. One of them was either team to win by 1 to 10 or the margin under 10.5 in the Roosters Storm game. And our logic was the Storm is a 4.5 point underdog, but in this case, they can lose by up to 10, we'll win the bet. Only thing they can't do is win by more than 10.5. We didn't think this Roosters side was going to get beaten by more than 10 points.
Right.
So for us, it was a great bet, and it worked perfectly because the Storm didn't cover the 4.5, but it was within 10. In this game, we feel a similar way. You're getting the Raiders, which we've got like a mechanical +8, but you're getting the Raiders can actually lose by up to 10, so you're getting a couple extra points of value. But rather than just betting either team 1 to 10, which you can get at $1.84. Just because of the great value of that $4.50, you can get the Raiders to win by 1 to 12. So it just gives you a couple extra points. Now, what's the odds the Raiders win this game by exactly 12? Very low. Maybe there's like a 2% chance, Who knows? Never say never. Yeah, it can happen.
Probably.
Right? Maybe even a little higher, 3%.
Maybe a bit more than 2%, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So there's just that little extra likelihood that if the Raiders are, nursing a 6-point lead late and take an intercept or whatever the case may be, you'd still win this. Basically, the bet is just for it to be a close game, which we expect that it will be. Should we unveil our same-game multi? This will be the last thing we do for tonight. I know it's been a long pod, but, it's the last game of the season. And, yeah, we've gone balls deep on this grand final because we don't want to leave any stone unturned to find value.
Yeah, let's unveil it. Look, before I put it on the screen, we have done 3 same-game multis. Well, we've done a bunch of same-game multis, but official, same-game multis.
Like exclusive
TryPod same-game multis, we have done 3 of them this year. One in Origin 1 at $8, I believe, Jacob. That one...
Was it $8 or $8.50?
Maybe
yeah,
$8. $8. That one won at $8. Origin 2, we lost that one, unfortunately. Last week, we do a same game, or 3 weeks ago, I think.
Week 1 of the finals.
Week 1 of the finals, we do a same game multi with BetEasy, $7. That one wins. So we're 2 out of 3 with one cashing at $8, one cashing at $7. Jacob has put in the hard yards for this one on points bet. He's negotiated his ass off for this one. So there it is on the screen. Official TryPod grand final same game multi. 2 legs. The Raiders to be winning at the 20-minute mark. That one usually is $2.90. And either team to win by 1 to 12 points. That bet is usually $1.69. Now, the beauty of this one is that if you multi these together, usually you do get $4.90, but they have boosted it up to $6. And Jacob, you might go into a bit more depth with this one, but as you know, you can probably talk a little bit about the correlation with this one and about how these two legs are positively correlated, so you are getting an even better deal.
Yeah, so we already spoke about why we think that this game will be within 1 to 12 either side. 1 try, max a 2 try deficit with these teams. We expect an arm wrestle. The total is very low. But one thing we haven't mentioned is how critical the start is. We feel if the Raiders can start strong, they don't even have to score the first try necessarily. But if they do, they've got to take their chances with points on offer, whether they take penalty shots, just converting any tries they score. If they get a lead, you just know that this game is on. If they fall behind and they've got to chase points, that's the scenario where I could see a non-close game. So we're saying not necessarily the Raiders will be leading at the 20-minute mark, but if they are, whether it's 2-0, 4-2, 6-4, 8-6, etc., it can be a tight lead, then there's even more likelihood that this game is going to fall within 1 to 12 on either side, because even if the Raiders are up 6 or more or whatever, you're not going to believe that the Raiders are going to win the game 13+. Right. But what you are going to think is that if the Roosters win, it's going to be close. So those two markets, if the Raiders lead after 20 minutes, are definitely correlated, but therefore it will be a closer finish. But we're getting the odds magnified and then added on a bit more. We're not getting, deducted like often in a same game multi. To give you any example, if you bet a player to score and his team to win, you don't get the true odds multiplied because the bookie's going to say, well, they're correlated. If he scores, more likely. We're getting two events that are both linked to each other, and we're getting the odds even higher. So, and as you said, we've done this just three times this year, and won 2 out of 3 at $7 and $8. So it's a great value play. If you want to find it, the link in the top of this podcast or the top of this video, you hit the link and it's in the markets there. And we're going to also post up about it, as well as the elite odds. I should mention, PointsBet, if you're on there as well, has a really good offer. $2 for either Teddy or Latrell to score. So this season, most of the time, it's been about $2 odds anytime try scorer for Teddy or Latrell individually. But this one, you get both of them. So if you like the Roosters, you're not going to find better value odds than $2. And obviously, we're not going to promote odds if we don't really think it's value. I know that people were skeptical in Origin 1 saying, oh, yeah, you guys are working for the bookies. You're giving us a tip that's probably going to lose. And I know a few people ate their words.
Hope you didn't get on
Origin 1. We really do only give these bets out if we love them and if we're going to try and get a slice of the action ourselves. So there you go, guys. Hit the link. Grab that bet while you can. $6 is very juicy, especially if you like the Green Machine.
Indeed, and if you want to bet that one, like Jacob said, there is a link in the description to this video. Just click that one and look in the name a bet section, I think it's called, Jacob. And you'll be able to...
The link will take you to the market.
The link will take you to the market. Positive correlation, like you explained, Jacob. It's just like if Raiders won 1 to 12, you have a lot more chance of getting drunk that day, right? Getting drunk after the game. Positive correlation. Jacob, I am getting some comments flowing through. Look at the reach that we have, that they've already propped it down to $5 this bet. So that was very quick.
Let us get on the...
We should
probably end this one, but we'll get onto the blower with PointsBet. We'll get them to put that up because we are able... They've promised us to do an enhanced odds, and we said, you realise people are going to smash this because we've won 2 out of 3 of this year, and they said, if the odds go down, it's just our traders in the trading room shitting themselves. We'll get the odds put back up. So don't bet it at less than $6.
Don't
Wait
bet at 5.
for us
we'll
to get them to put it back up, and stay tuned in the group.
Indeed, need a PointsBet account. Like we said, just hit the link in the description to this video. If you need any extra information, just shoot the TryPod page a message or shoot us a message in the TryPod app. Any additional best bets that we release will be in the app on Saturday morning, I think we said, as well as any other bets for any of the other games on the Sunday. But thanks again for tuning in, guys. Thanks again for another great NRL season, and hopefully we can top it off with a high. But we'll catch you guys. When are we going to do recap pod? Are we going to even do a recap pod, Jacob?
People can stay tuned. Again, it might depend on how drunk we do get on Sunday.
Yeah, which could be very drunk if Raiders win 1 to 12. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll let you know when we're doing a recap pod. Good luck with your bets. Let's win some money this weekend.